Can you say another all-time high?
Another all-time high.
Bitcoin has broken above 29,470, and it just seems like it wants to reach 30,000 before the new year, which will be really exciting. Um, Nobody expected or projected this. Everybody thought possibly 20,000 by the end of this year, but it continues to surge. And so I just wanted to let people know I'll be doing the second in the series on the cryptos for ding dongs next week. And please do tune in, join us for that. The first show that I did was crazy, but just a week ago. And it was when Bitcoin broke 20,000 and set all time highs. And, though I am not a financial advisor and I'm not in any way, um, you know, professional as far as having opinion that matters when it comes to things like this. I've seen, the whole thing with regard to the internet market and all of those stocks, and I was involved in day trading, and so this feels similar to all of that. And now you can see the excitement of people that are involved and already, the early adopters to the space, because really it's still less than 1% of the population of the world that even knows how to buy Bitcoin or purchase cryptocurrencies or is involved in, the protocol at all. And I do believe that with regard to a blockchain, just the technology, that it can benefit the world in ways that are underutilized. Like, for instance, the whole thing with, the vote and the possibility of people voting that aren't alive, or multiple votes under, the same name. I mean, different things like that. With blockchain and consensus and the way that, um, the consensus protocol works, you cannot counterfeit. And the way that, even with the way that Bitcoin and the technology works, it's all verified by the users themselves and the miners that get paid to verify um, just all of the historicity of every interaction that's ever taken place, and all the people that own it, and even to which, electronic wallet the Bitcoin is actually sitting in. So things of that nature, if applied to even, supply and demand, and the way that distribution, even Amazon and companies like that, Walmart, it will be a way of auditing and keeping track of, doing inventory, um, that, I mean, again, just like with the vote, it can help situations and give veracity to the whole electoral process. And so there's a lot more to this technology and the application of it that is coming forth. And I think that the world's going to benefit, and that those that do get on board with acceptance of it and embrace it, that it could possibly, be like your Willy Wonka golden ticket. And so, anyways, that's all I'm going to say about that for this evening. I did just want to share that bit of news, since we just, less than an hour ago set another all-time high. But anyways, um, I'm going to be covering the Archko volume this evening. This is the second in the series that we did just again, I think it was maybe last week, and maybe I did the crypto show 2 weeks ago. But anyways, things are just flying on that side of everything. But anyways, the show that we did, and I do believe it was last Wednesday. Yeah, it was last Wednesday actually. I covered the accounts of the shepherds and of what the even Gamaliel, who was the teacher of Saul, Paul, who became Paul the apostle, that he went to interview Joseph and Mary about the young Yeshua and to ask them about the signs of his coming and about the supernatural aspects of his birth and coming into this world. And so both Mary and Joseph gave the witness of the angel Gabriel coming to them and telling them that he would be the savior of the Israelites and of the world. And just as John had announced, behold the lamb that takes away the sins of the world, in similarity, Gabriel had announced to Mary that she would bear a child, and being virgin and never having known a man, she had no idea how this could be. And yet it was a miracle that was as Isaiah had put forth in scripture, would be a sign to the Israelites and to the children of promise that indeed the Messiah had been born. And so that was one of the, again, the prophecies that were fulfilled. And so we're going to continue with that account, and then we're going to go into others, like, for instance, that of Pontius Pilate, and also of um, the guards that were there when he was resurrected and came forth from the tomb. And so I'm going to continue with the story of Joseph and Mary in their interview by Gamaliel. If you have any questions, oh, also, I did today finished, um, we did the final edit for this particular volume. And so it will be made available on through our website, sacredwordpublishing.com. And I believe that, especially for those of you that are believers and that truly love, have heartfelt yearning and interest in being a follower of Christ, a Christian in heart and soul, that this account, this narrative, and the eyewitness account of the individuals that make up portion of this story, that it's going to greatly benefit your life to have this material and to be able to read it. And I'm not even, saying it's not about selling books, because you can find this online, and you could probably even download a free PDF somewhere to gain access to the material and to read it for yourself. We just want you to know about it so that you can, study it, read it, and let it benefit you, especially those of you that are believers, because I do feel that, like the infancy gospels, it will move you. The Spirit, without a doubt, will move you to tears in reading and learning about these accounts. And this is one of the few places that you actually get a physical description of what Yahushua looks like. And so that will be, because I know a lot of people are interested. And so we'll come forth to um, that aspect of the story as well. I'm probably going to do at least a couple more shows on this, just because I feel like it would benefit, again, especially our listening audience and those of you that don't know about this material. I think it will bless your life. It will touch you, and there's nothing, in my opinion, better than studying uh, about the Word, the Memra, the Logos, the Son of God, the only begotten, our Redeemer, our Savior, our Lord, and our King. And so it's a blessing to me to be able to do this and to share this with you as well. And so let's go ahead and get into the story. Picking up where we left off in the account of Gamaliel's interview with Joseph and Mary. And for those of you that did hear the last show, we left off with Mary describing how aloof Yahushua was when it came to, um, flirting and playing with the other young girls or the other children, that he was standoffish and that he seemed to be caught up in cares not of this world. And he certainly was not interested in the carnal aspects of what, you know, children that come into puberty or that are sexually enticed by their, just by their growing into an age to procreate, which we know that he came only to redeem and to restore us, and his purpose was not physical, but spiritual. All right, continuing. Thus it seems that Joseph and Mary have both lost all confidence in his becoming anything. They seem to think that the Sanhedrin should do something for him to get him out and let him show himself to the people. I tried to console them by telling them that my understanding of the prophecy was that he had to come to the high priesthood first and there work in the spiritual dominion of the heart. And when he had brought about a unity of heart and oneness of aim, it would be easy enough to establish his political claim. And all who would not willingly submit to him, it would be an easy matter with the sword of Joshua or Gideon to bring under his control. It seemed to me that his parents' ideas are of a selfish character, that they care nothing about the Jewish government nor the Roman oppression. All they think of is self exaltation and to be personally benefited by their son's greatness. But I told them they were mistaken, that the building up of the kingdom of heaven was not to be done by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of the Lord. And it would not do for us to use carnal weapons, nor to expect carnal pleasures to be derived therefrom. That it was not my understanding of the prophecy that the king was to use such weapons either for himself or for the benefit of a party, but for the good of all men, that his dominion was to be universal, and it was to be of a spiritual character, that he was sent to the lost and not to the found. His parents told me of an old man who lived on the road to Bethany, who had once been a priest, a man of great learning, and well skilled in the laws and prophets, and that Jesus was often there with him, reading the law and prophets together, that his name was Massalian, and that I might find Jesus there. But he was not there. Massalian said he was often at Bethany with a young family, and he thought there was some love affair between him and one of the girls. I asked him if he had seen anything like a courtship between them. He said he had not, but inferred from their intimacy and from the fondness on the woman's part, as well as from the laws of nature, that such would be the case. I asked him to give me an outline of the character of Jesus. He said that he was a young man of the finest thought and feeling he ever saw in his life, that he was the most apt in his answers and solutions of difficult problems of any man of his age he had ever seen, that his answers seemed to give more universal satisfaction, so much so that the oldest philosopher would not dispute with him, or in any manner join issue with him, or ask the second time. I asked Massalian, who taught him to read and interpret the law and the prophets? He said that his mother said that he had always known how to read the law, that his mind seemed to master it from the beginning, and into the laws of nature and the relation of man to his fellow in his teachings or talks. He gives a deeper insight, inspiring mutual love and strengthening the common trust of society. Another plan he has of setting men right with the laws of nature. He turns nature into a great law book of illustrations, showing that every bush is a flame, every rock a fountain of water, every star a pillar of fire, and every cloud the one that leads to God. He makes all nature preach the doctrine of trust in the divine. Fatherhood. He speaks of the lilies as pledges of God's care, and points to the fowls as evidence of his watchfulness over human affairs. Who can measure the distance between God and the flower of the field? What connection is there between man and the lily? By such illustrations, he creates a solicitude in man that seems to awe him into reverence. And he becomes attracted toward heavenly thought and feels that he is in the presence of one that is superior. In this talk, he brings one to feel he is very near the presence of God. He says, how much more your Father? The plain is one, though the intermediate points are immeasurably distant. Thus, by beginning with the flower, he reasons upward to the absolute, and then descends and teaches lessons of trust in a loving Father. The lessons of trust in God reassure the anxious listener and create an appetite that makes him long for more. And it often seems, when he has brought his hearers to the highest point of anxiety, he suddenly breaks off and leaves his company as though he cared nothing for them. Jesus, in his talk, brings all these illustrations to make man feel his nearness to his kindred, man, teaching also their relation to and dependence upon God. And although his method is happy, it does not seem to me that it is the most successful. He teaches that man and the flowers and birds drink from the same fountain and are fed from the same table. Yet at the same time, he seems to do everything to excite suspicion and prejudice. We that are watching him to see his divine mission commence, he is continually tantalizing our expectations, as well as mocking our natural reason and desires. When a man separates himself from all other men, both in point of doctrine as well as discipline, He takes a very great risk on his part, especially when he confines God to one channel, and that one of his own dictation. A man that assumes these responsible positions must have vast resources from which to draw, or he will sink in the whirlpool which his own impertinence has created. Through Jesus, in his teachings or talks, his words sound so much like the teaching of Hillel or Shammai that I must call it teaching, though he has no special scholars. We learn that God is Spirit and God is Father, and he says these are the only two things that are essential for man to know. Then he illustrates this to the parents and asks them, what would they do for their children? He was telling some mothers a circumstance of a mother starving herself to feed her child, and then applied it to God as our Father. And they commenced shouting. They were so happy, and Jesus got up and left the house in seeming disgust. Massilian says he is tempted at times to become impatient with Jesus, as he devotes so much time to details. It seems almost a waste of time for a man who came to save the world to be lingering over a special case of disease. He thinks he could hasten Jesus' physical deportment. Why not? Speak one word and remove every sick patient from his sickbed at the same hour. What a triumph this would be. I asked him if Jesus had healed anyone. He said, not as yet, but if he is to be king of the Jews, he was to heal all nations. And why not do it at once? If he would, there would be nothing more required to establish his kingship. But I said to him, is it not equally so with God's creative power? See what time and labor it takes to bring forth a grain of corn. Why not have caused the earth to bring forth every month instead of every year? Christ was talking in defense of his Father. The people must learn to love and obey the Father before they would reverence the Son. Yes, he said the God that Jesus represented was one that the people might love and venerate, that he was a God of love and had no bloody designs to execute on even a bad man, provided he ceased his evil ways. It is to be noted that in all Jesus' talk, there are manifest references to the future. Many of his statements were like a sealed letter, not to be opened, but by time. A grain of mustard was to result in a large tree. All his ideas refer to the future, like the parent helping the child with his burden of today. By telling of the blessing of tomorrow, and by making today the seed corn of tomorrow, keeping the action of today under moral control, by making the morrow the day of judgment. He stated further that Jesus was a young man who was the best judge of human nature he had ever seen, that he thought at times he could tell men their thoughts and expose their bad principles. And while he had all these advantages of life, he seemed not to care for them, nor to use them abusively. He seems to like all men, one as well as another, so much so that his own parents have become disgusted with him and have almost cast him off. But Jesus has such a peculiar temperament that he seems not to care and is well satisfied with one as another. He said that Jesus seemed fond of Mary and Martha, who lived at Bethany. and probably I might find him there. Massilian is a man of very deep thought and most profound judgment. All his life he has made the scriptures his study. He too is a good judge of human nature, and he is satisfied that Jesus is the Christ. He said that Jesus seemed to understand the prophecy by intuition. I asked him where Jesus was taught to read the prophecy. He said that his mother told him that Jesus could read from the beginning, that no one had ever taught him to read. He's uh we'll be right back for second portion.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses?
Which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible.
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us the second Friday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
you with Joseph, Mary, and in this case, Massilian, who was a scholar and student of the scripture, very well versed in prophecy. All right, continuing. He said that he, in making quotations from the prophets, was sometimes mistaken, or his memory failed him, but Jesus could correct him every time without the scroll, and that sometimes he thought Jesus was certainly mistaken, but never in a single instance was he wrong. I asked him to describe his person to me so that I might know him if I should meet him. He said, "If you ever meet him, you will know him. While he is nothing but a man, there is something about him that distinguishes him from every other man. He is the picture of his mother, only he is not her smooth, round face. His hair is a little more golden than hers, though it is as much from sunburn as anything else. He is tall, and his shoulders are a little dropped. His visage is thin and of a swarthy complexion, and though this is from exposure, his eyes are large and a soft blue, and rather dull and heavy. The lashes are long, and his eyebrows very large. His nose is that of a Jew. In fact, he reminds me of an old-fashioned Jew in every sense of the word." Now, I just want to comment here that in the account of Pontius Pilate, in his testimony to Tiberius Caesar of what Yeshua looks like, he gives the exact same description. He describes him as having blue eyes and golden hair. And so, those are two different eyewitnesses of, his physical description, which is something I know a lot of people are interested in. But, people also have their belief, when it comes to his physical description. And so sometimes, even when you have eyewitness account, some are unwilling to hear. All right, continue. He is not a great talker unless there is something brought up about heaven and divine things. When his tongue moves glibly and his eyes light up with a peculiar brilliancy, though there is the peculiarity about Jesus, he never argues a question, he never disputes. He will commence and state facts, and they are on such a solid basis that nobody will have the boldness to dispute with him. Though he has such mastership of judgment, he takes no pride in confuting his opponents, but always seems to be sorry for them. I have seen him attacked by the scribes and doctors of the law, and they seem like little children, learning their lessons under a master. His strongest points are in the spiritual power of the law and the intentions of the prophets. The young people tried to get him to take a class of them and teach them, but he utterly refused. This Jew is convinced that he is the Messiah of the world. I went from there to Bethany, but Jesus was not there. They said he and Lazarus were away. They could not tell where. I went and saw Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, and had a long talk with them. They are very pleasant and nice young maids, and Mary is quite handsome. I teased her about Jesus, but they both denied that Jesus was anything like a lover. He was only a friend. Though this is so common for young maids, I did not know whether to believe them or not until I told them my real business. And when I told them that this was the same person that was born of the Virgin in Bethlehem some 26 years before, and that his mother had told me all the facts in the case. They seemed deeply interested. They then told me upon their honor that Jesus never talked or even hinted to either one of them on the subject of marriage. Martha blushed and said she wished he had. If he was to be a king, she would like to be a queen. I asked them if they had ever seen him in the company of young virgins. They said they had not. I asked them if they had heard him talk about young girls or if he sought their society more than that of men, and they both declared they had not, and they were very much surprised that he did not. I asked them what he talked of when in their company, and they said he was not much in their company, that he and their brother would go upon the housetop, and they stayed there half the night, and sometimes all night, talking and arguing points of interest to them both. Mary said she had often gone near so she could listen to them, for she loved to hear him talk. He was so mild and unpretending, and then he was so intelligent that he was different from any man and all other young men she had ever seen. I asked them what was their brother's opinion of him. They said he thought there was never was such a man on earth. He thought him to be one of God's prophets. He said when they are out in the mountains, as they are most all the time, Jesus can tell him all about the flowers, trees, and rocks, can tell him everything in the world, and that none of the wild animals are afraid of him. He says often, the stag and the wolf will come and stand for Jesus to stroke their mane and seem almost loath to go away from him. He says that no poisonous serpent will offer to hiss at him. Their brother thinks he is perfectly safe if Jesus is with him. I asked them if he had ever told their brother anything about himself. They said that if he had spoken to their brother, he had not told them. Now, masters of Israel, after having investigated this matter, after tracing Jesus from his conception to the present time, after obtaining all the information that is to be had on this important subject, getting it from those who are more likely to tell the truth, from the fact they are disinterested persons, and then taking a prophetical as well as historical view of the subject, I have come to the conclusion that this is the Christ that we are looking for. And as a reason for my conclusion, I will call your attention to the following facts. First, to the prophecy of Isaiah, section 7. And he said, Hear now, saith the Lord, O house of David, is it a small thing for you? Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name God with men. Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that God abhorreth shall be forsaken of her king. Section 8. Bind the testimony, seal the law among his disciples. The Lord will hide his face from the house of Jacob, and he will look for him. Here is a literal fulfillment of this word of the Most High God. so clear and plain that none may mistake. Jeremiah 31st section. Turn, O virgin, to thy people, for the hand of the Lord is upon thee. For the Lord shall create a new thing in the earth. A woman shall compass a man. Here again are set forth the same things that Isaiah speaks of, and the same thing that I have learned from Mary. Micah, section 5. Thou, Bethlehem, Ephratah, thou art little among the thousands of Judah, but out of thee shall come forth unto me him that shall rule my people. He is from everlasting, and I will give them up until the time she travaileth to bring forth my firstborn, that he may rule all people. Here we have the city, the virgin, the office, his manner of life, the seeking him by the Sanhedrin. All these things are under our eyes as full and complete as I now write them, who have all this testimony given in this letter. How can we as a people dispute these things? In the 49th section of Genesis, making reference to the history that is now upon us, the writer says, a captive shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawmaker from him, until Shiloh come and gather his people between his feet and keep them forever. That was the end of chapter 5, the report of Gamaliel to the Sanhedrin, and sharing the eyewitness testimony of Joseph and Mary, Lazarus, Martha, and the other Mary of Magdala, as well as the scholar Massilian. Now, I'm going to read from the report of Caiaphas, the high priest, to the Sanhedrin concerning the execution, the passion of Christ. This is chapter 6. Records of the Jerusalem Sanhedrin by Eliezek Hyken, taken in Constantinople, October 16th, 1883. Caiaphas, priest of the Most High God, to the masters of Israel, greeting. In obedience to your demands for a reason for my action in the case of Jesus of Nazareth, and in defense of my conduct, I beg leave to submit the following for your consideration. I would assure you that it was not on account of personal malice, envy, or hate that existed in my own nature, nor for the want of a willingness upon my part to conform to the Jewish law in its strictest sense. I had but very little personal knowledge of this Nazarene. The most I knew of this man was from outside sources, nor was it because he claimed to be king of the Jews, nor because he said he was the Son of God. I would that he were, nor because he prophesied or ignored the holy temple. No, nor all of these combined. There is a cause in a more weighty matter back of all these things that controlled my action. In the matter, Therefore, I hope you will investigate strictly on legal principles the reason that I may give. In order that you might be able to see and weigh the question fully and remember the responsibility that rests upon me according to the laws of our nation, I will ask you to go back with me to the chronicles of our history. As a commonwealth, first, our faith is pledged to one living and true God, this God being indescribable, unchangeable, incomprehensible, and of course, unnameable. But yet in our daily communications with and our applications to him, he has been pleased to give us his name, or his several names, according to his relations to us, and they are found nowhere, only in the ark of his holy temple, there where he presents to us his strength and power. He calls himself Eloi, which means almighty in strength, that he can do what he will without effort, that he does the greatest thing as easy as he does the least. This makes him different from all beings. In his holy ark, he records himself Elah, existence without beginning, and no contingency as to his end. Again, he writes himself Heliahon, unchangeable, that is, nothing but his own will can change him. Again, he records his name Yah, knowledge that comprehends without being comprehended. Combining the several names as we have Jehovah, the Hebrew God, a man never can go wrong while he can pronounce this name in its comprehensive sense. This is where the Zealots, the Sadducees, the Essenes had their origin, and it is the want of being able to pronounce this name, origin, this name in its comprehensive sense, that causes so much dissension among us Jews. Jesus could pronounce this name, but he stole it out of the temple, as I am credibly informed. But the object in calling your attention to pronouncing his name with all its bearings may be seen if we turn to the third book of Leviticus, section 10, wherein is the special order made by our God to Moshe that we should offer the bullock, the ram, the flour, and the oil, and the people should fast 7 days. And this should be kafir, or atonement, for the sins of all the people. Now, unless Moshe was deceived, he has deceived us, or Jesus of Nazareth is a false teacher, for all he teaches is metanoite, as though a man's being sorry for a crime would make resolution to the offended party. A man might repent ever so much, but what good would that do towards healing the man he had injured? None in the least. This mode of making atonement was ordained of God and revealed to Moshe. But if a man has nothing to do but to repent, the disease carries its own remedy with it, so a man can sin as often as he may wish to. Look at the first book, section 3. And God said to Abraham by his own mouth that each and all that were circumcised by the cutting of the prepuce should be saved. This should be the seal of the covenant. Now, if this is not true, God must go against his own contract, violate his own promises, as well as deceive the faith and cheat the obedient of his children. This is also if Jesus' teaching be true, for he sets up table, baptism as the seed of God. I refer you to section 10, division. First, where God said to Moshe that he had changed the laws, converted the elements for the protection of his people, and with his own arm had delivered them out of a strong compact, and that they might remember, that the generation to be born might remember and never forget to trust in him when in danger. He said that once every year we should roast a kid or lamb and eat it with the unleavened bread, and this should be the sign that we would trust in him in all times of danger. Now Jesus teaches that common bread and wine are to be used instead of thereof a thing unheard of. And not only so, something that is altogether repugnant to God, and something that fosters drunkenness and is well qualified to excite men's passions. And oh, ye masters of Israel, but think once, Jesus calls himself the Son of God, claims to have been born of Alma, the Hebrew word of a virgin, that he and his Father are one, they are equal. These things will establish the following conclusions. If he is right, his Father is false. If they were one, then their teaching would be one. And if his teachings are true, God's must be wrong, or there are not those perfections in him that we learn in pronouncing his holy name. By tolerating the teachings of Yahushua, we say to the Romans that all of our former teachings are false, that the Hebrews' God is not to be trusted, that he is weak, wanting in forethought, that he is vacillating and not to be trusted, much less to be honored and obeyed. Thus, the world will lose confidence in our God and confidence in us as a religious people. This is impregnating the whole atmosphere with moral pollution. It does not only cut off, but blocks the way of all Jews from heaven. And not only this, it excludes our hope in the salvation of our forefathers, who have obeyed God and his ordinances, believed in his promises, and shouted in the triumph of a holy life for 1400 years. He entirely ignores God's holy temple, the house of God, had built by our forefathers under his own supervision, where he promised to dwell with his children, to hear their prayers, and to be pleased with their sacrifices. This temple is the bond of the Jews. Here all men can come and be blessed. It is the earthly home. All right, we'll be right back for second hour.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
All right, welcome back, everybody. For second hour, this show is just flying by. We will continue with the eyewitness testimony. I appreciate. Let me also just check, see if there's any questions. I try to do that during the break, and so if you do have questions, the best time is to do it during the top of the hour break, and there's a lot of you that are really appreciating this reading, and I appreciate all of you for listening in and for your interest. I know many of you are believers, Um, Cindy says, I love this. Thank you, Zen. Stephanie, shalom, beautiful family. The carpenter's son, my good brother that we just had an interview with, Jared. Shout out to you and your family, brother. He says, Zen, love this reading. I've heard you read for 8 years, and this really makes Jesus seem human yet God, like a friend you've known forever. I do agree. And which is, the uniqueness of this testimony. And it comes from various perspectives. Those that denied him as Messiah, that crucified him, and those that knew him intimately as family member, as friend, as, even as the youth that they had grown up with, you know, even though here he's 26 years old when this particular testimony from Gamaliel was come forth, but Martha and Mary had known him his whole life. And we know that Lazarus would be one of his friends that he would resurrect and bring forth from the grave. And how deeply, is his love for that family in knowing and growing up with Lazarus and being one of his best friends. And the two sisters, Mary and Martha. It brings a different sense and perspective to the story. All right, let us continue. This temple is the bond of the Jews. Here all men can come and be blessed. It is the earthly home of the souls of men, the place where men may hide from the storms of sin and persecution. This temple is where the foolish may learn wisdom, the place where the naked soul can be clothed, and where the hungry may be fed. This is the grandest gift of our Father. Jesus completely ignores this temple, says the priests have made it a den of thieves, and sets up a sneer and even scoffs at its sacred ordinances, and with a sort of selfish triumph says it shall be destroyed. And from his manner of saying it, I have no doubt he would be glad to see it quickly done. But what would be the condition of our people if this temple was removed? What would be the use of the priesthood if the temple was destroyed? Where would we find an answer by Urim and Thummim? How would the soul of a man be purified if the holy Bathkol, the Uruk of God, should depart? There, in that sacred temple of God, he has been burning to the consuming of sin and the purifying of heart since our return from bondage in Babylon. My argument is, if this temple is destroyed, or even forsaken by the Jews, we as a nation are utterly ruined. We might as well put our necks under the feet of idolatry and give up all hope. One more subject I placed before my masters of Israel. Is it compatible with our religion, or is it consistent with philosophy, or admitted in his holy word that there can be more gods than one? When we pronounce Elilai Shaddai, Elion, Adonai, which is Jehovah, there can be but one living God. By reference to section 6, no, for he says by mouth of Moshe, when he was all aglow with the glory of God, and remember, he speaks either by mouth or quill. It is he that speaks and not man. He says, the Lord your God is one God, there can be but one. I am and have been with you. I brought you up, I delivered you out of a strong compact. I delivered you out of their hand and kept you dry while your enemies were drowned in the sea. I will not forsake you. I promised your father I would not. But if you forsake me, then desolation will come upon you and have you in swift destruction. In section 5, 3, and 4 of David's Song of Joy. I am God alone. If I turn to the right or to the left, if I go down into the depths of the sea or into the center of the earth or over the heavens, I should find no companion. In section 3, he says, I am God alone, and alone I am God. Beside me there is no help for man, nor angels. Then in section 13, this command has been given. Thou shalt pay to the Lord thy God once a year a half shekel of silver, that thou and thy children and all the strangers that are within thy gate may know that there is no God beside me, on whom they may call in time of danger. Now, having all these commands and teaching from the very lips of God himself before my eyes, and being held responsible for the soundness of our doctrine and the proper inculcation of the same among the people of the Jews, what was I to do? Could I stand as the priest of the Most High God and see our blessed religion perverted by an impostor? Could I stand and see the holy temple of our God deserted and forsaken? Could I stand and see all the holy ordinances which had been appointed by God for securing salvation to Israel perverted by an impostor? All the blessed doctrines that were appointed for the government and instruction of the priesthood, thence to be imparted to the youth of our land, set aside, and that by one that could show no authority, only the authority of John the Baptist, who could give no authority, only the one who sent him to baptize, and he could not tell who he was, nor whence he came? Hence you can see the responsible position that I, as the high priest of God and of the Jewish church, occupied. According to our laws, I was made responsible and stood between my God and my people to protect them in doctrine and government. I refer you to the capitulation made by the Sanhedrin and Augustus Caesar in the holy Tofta of the Talmuds. We submitted to taxation by the Romans, and the Romans are to protect our holy religion from foreign foes, in order that the holy temple or any of its sacred ordinances should never be molested, nor the holy city, Jerusalem, be polluted by Roman idolatry. Now, the insinuating plan adopted by Jesus was well qualified to deceive the common people. It had already led many to forsake the temple and hold their ordinances in derision, as well as to neglect the teachings of the priest or to pay the tithes for their supplies. He had already inculcated into the Jewish mind his pernicious ways of being saved, to that extent that the Jewish cause was almost lost. There are two reasons for this. First, the people to whom he preached were an important ignorant set, and knew but very little about doctrine of any kind. They are a restless sort of men who are always finding fault and wanting something new, and never associate with the more enlightened part of the community in order to learn. Another reason of his having many followers is his doctrines are congenial to unsanctified flesh. They are so suited to human nature that they require no sacrifices. They need not go to the temple to worship God. They need not fast, and they can when and where they please. They need pay no tithes to keep up the temple or the priesthood. But every man can be his own priest and worship God as he chooses. All this is so compatible with human nature that, although he has not been preaching over 3 years, he has more followers today than Abraham has, and they have become perfectly hostile toward the Jews that are faithful to their God. And if it had not been for the Roman soldiers on the day of his execution, we would have had one of the bloodiest insurrections ever known to the Jewish commonwealth. I am told that there was never seen such a concourse of people assembled at Jerusalem as at the cross. One of my guards informs me that there were several 100,000, and although there were two others crucified at the same time, Jesus was the great center of attraction. They would call out, "Who is this Jesus of Nazareth? What is his crime?" Some of his friends would cry out, "Nothing. He is being executed because he was a friend to the poor." "Take him down! Take him down!" they would cry out, and the soldiers would have to use their spears to keep them back. But when he yielded up the ghost, he proved to all that he was hypostatical, that is, a human body, and the ludicrous had come from the Icelandic covenant. And his Trinitarius, Trinitatis Unitas, was all a sham. For how could this unpronounced name suffer or be captured by men? Okay, hold on one second here. I have to highlight that so I can look up what that word means. It's in Latin, I'm sure. Okay. For how could this unpronounced name suffer or be captured by men or die unless he is the one that is to die for the many? And if so, I was only accomplishing God's holy purposes, which exonerates me from guilt. But it seems to me a necessity that he should be removed. That this may be evident to your minds, I ask you to contrast our present condition with the past. Jesus of Nazareth spent 2 years in Egypt under the instruction of Rabbi Joshua and learned the art of thaumaturgy to perfection, which that's magic, I'm assuming. As he has never been taught in any of the schools of necromancy among the heathen. If the healing miracles of Jesus are true, as they must be, for they are so acknowledged by his foes as well as his friends, he must have learned it from Horus and Serapis and practiced by those heathen priests. He came back to Palestine as a physician and was by nature an enthusiast as well as a Hebrew patriarch. And when John's preaching excited idealistic minds, Jesus also went to that teacher and was inspired by him to inculcate and promulgate his doctrines. Notwithstanding his youth and inexperience, Jesus started out as a public orator and a teacher with the doctrines of John, and in that capacity referred exclusively to his authority, as every public teacher in these days has to be ordained by some acknowledged authority. As long as John was at large, Jesus, in the capacity of an itinerant teacher and physician, roused the people of Galilee to metanoia, repentance of sin, to bring about a restoration of the kingdom of heaven. He met with the same opposition that John did from those who would not admit that they were more sinful than their progenitors were, or that asceticism was the proper means for the restoration of the kingdom of heaven, but he met with the same success among the lower classes, such as foreign harlots, sodomites, publicans, and other Roman agents. But the intelligent portion remained cold and unmoved by his enthusiasm. The cures which he performed appeared miraculous to his followers, but most ridiculous to the intelligent Jews and men of sober and reflective mind. Jesus embraced the humanitarian doctrine of the Hillelites, presenting conspicuously the cosmopolitan spirit of Judaism, and he did it almost in the words of Hillel, who had taught it before. Their faith and doctrine being alike, it was not hard for him to create excitement or to find plenty of followers. In addition to all this, he taught a system of low morals and so void of all ritualistic ideas that it was easy for him to get any number of followers. He taught the people that there was but one living and true God, but he taught them that he was that God and that his Father was merged into himself and could not manifest himself only through him, which theory would confute itself if they would only stop to reflect. For as he was hypostatical or corporeal, his assistance was cut off from all that was not immediately in his presence, which is altogether incompatible with the faith of the Jews. Right in the face of this doctrine, he would teach that there was a special providence as well as a general providence, as if there could be a general providence without a God that could present in all places at all times. As we learn in pronouncing his name, he taught that the dead will rise and live again in a future state of happiness or misery, according as they have lived here. Therefore, he taught future rewards and punishments. But he being present, how could he reward in the future? He taught the revelation and the prophets, but contradicted all they teach. He taught the election of Israel by the Almighty, but ignored all the doctrines of Israel. He taught the eternity of God's law and promises and the superimportance of the humanitarian over the ritual laws and doctrines. But I do not think he wished to abolish the latter or even the traditional laws, but merely to supersede them by a higher life. The natural result of all this was that he disregarded the laws of Levitical cleanliness, which were considered so important by the Shammaites and Essenes, and also by the Hillelites. This is the point where division commenced, and the breach grew wider and wider, until the insurrection must have been the result. He so far cut himself loose from the Jews that he ate with unclean sinners, publicans, lepers, and permitted harlots to touch him, while his disciples went so far as to eat their meals without washing themselves. Furthermore, he looked upon the whole of the Levitical institutions, temples, sacrifices, and priesthood included, as no longer necessary and not worth the life of the animal. This was certainly the opinion of the Hillelites. Jesus, it seems, found in the Hillelite school partly furnished to hand, ready to take up with his heresy, and a large party there are almost sufficient to divide the whole Jewish commonwealth. They taught the repentance of sin, the practice of benevolence and charity, the education of the young and goodwill toward mankind, as possessing much more moral worth than all the Levitical cleanness or compliance with the whole moral law given to us by our God to govern us. His preaching was of the parabolic style. He would rely on a text of scripture, for he seemed to hold the midrash style of the scribe as a maxim, expressed in the style of Solon or of Sirach's son. His great object was to come as near the Jewish theology as possible so as to destroy the Jews entirely and establish his own. Hence he resorted to the allegorical methods of the Egyptian Hebrews, uttering many good and wise sayings which were not new to the learned, but which were taken from the common wisdom of the country, which was known by all who were acquainted with the literature of the rabbis. But they were new to his class of hearers, who were not accustomed to listen to the wise. He had no education, comparatively speaking. He was full of nervous excitement, all of which went to inspire his hearers with enthusiasm. He took but little care of his health or person, cared not for his own relatives. He traveled mostly on foot in the country of his disciples and some suspicious women, and lived on the charity of his friends. He seemed to take no notice of the political affairs of his country, would as soon be governed by one nation as another. In fact, it seemed if he had any preference, it was for the Romans. It seems that he became so infatuated that he really thought he was the head of the kingdom of heaven. This manner of preaching, along with his presumption, aroused his enemies to a powerful pitch, and it was all I could do to keep the zealous from mobbing him in the temple. They had no confidence in a doctrine that set the Jewish laws at naught and mocked the priesthood of God. And they, with the Sadducees and scribes, were not willing to submit to a man who acknowledged no authority higher than himself and was seemingly endeavoring to overturn everything that they held more sacred and dear than life. Jesus' mode and manner were well qualified to deceive the unsuspecting. "Let us have all things in common," said he, "and he that would be greatest among you will prove his greatness by rendering the greatest service to all. And if any of the higher powers compel thee to go a mile, let him that is compelled go 10 miles. This caused him to be attacked more in his policy than in his doctrine. The great question with us Jews was, here are the Romans upon us. How can we get rid of them? Jesus' idea was to let the Romans alone. It matters not who rules and governs the nations. If they abuse you, love them in return, and they cannot be your enemies long. No man can continue to abuse another who returns injuries with love. Keep from them, pray in secret for the return of the kingdom of heaven and God's grace, and this will soon make all things right. Pay your taxes, he would say to them. It is only Caesar's money you pay, which is unlawful for you to have unlawful on account of its idolatrous effigies. Again, he would say to his hearers, you cannot conquer the Romans. Better convert them, and they are your enemies no longer. All right, we'll be right back for final segment.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses?
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible.
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us the second Friday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for a final segment. This show is passing by relatively quick. And, but very interesting. And so, as I said, the manuscript of the Archko Volume will be out and available. And for those that have not looked at or read any of our material, we always publish these ancient manuscripts in a 14-point font. so that it's a lot easier to read, and um, and you can study without straining your eyes. You can read without, overtaxing your mind. Um, I do find it for, people that are seekers of truth and researchers and that like to read a lot, that it is beneficial to have books and the ancient sources in larger manuscript. And so it certainly helps me. And a large part of what we do and what we have done over the years, and compiling a lot of these ancient manuscripts and these ancient texts, is for my personal use, and that of my son and any of you that might be interested in reading the ancient manuscripts for yourself and that want to at least read them to know what they say before, judging them, as the majority of mainstream churchianity, and condemning all things non-KJV, which is idealistically utterly ridiculous. I mean, how? Because you ask them about these different books, they don't even know what they're about, what they contain, what they teach, and yet they judge them and want to place guilt upon you should you have a willingness to open them or to discuss them or to examine them. I mean, it's a truly ignorant mindset. And yet this is the perspective. This is the viewpoint that um, mainstream believers are trying to push upon one another in controlling the dialogue and keeping people afraid to even open up anything that is not the 66 books of the accepted authorized canon. Even though, even the canon in its original publication was 80 books and included the Apocrypha and then the Shepherd of Hermas. But, even those are condemned as well. But anyways, let us continue. I think we should be able to finish out this section before ending tonight's discussion. Oh, also, just wanted to quickly mention that Rob and I did a show last night, but he was not able to connect with the studio on TFR, so we just did a pre-recorded broadcast, and I have to say it was a most excellent show. There was a lot of information that we covered, which I don't believe people know or are very familiar. And so those of you that have been enjoying the Genesis Revisited series, I think you will really enjoy this show as well. And he's going to fix it for release on next Wednesday's broadcast. And then he'll be joining me on Thursday for a continuation of the study. But that Wednesday evening, I believe, unless I have any guests, I will be doing a follow-up on a crypto show for entering into the new year. All right, let us continue before we run out of time. And I just want to say, God bless all of you. I mean, it's crazy, this is the pagan new year, the beginning in the middle of winter, which makes absolutely no sense. Why you would begin a year in the middle of winter in January. God's calendar, which we will be releasing an updated version of the Enochian lunar calendar. We do release one that begins with January in accordance with the pagan new year. However, we will release the seasonal Enochian lunar solar calendar beginning with the month of March, Abib, which, God's calendar is linear, begins with the first month, Nisan or Abib, with, and then progresses through spring, then summer, then fall, and then winter. And it ends with, the sun crossing the vernal equinox for what is the beginning of spring, which makes total sense. I mean, you would think that the year would reflect the progression of the seasons, and yet Satan has turned everything upside down, has us celebrating New Year in the middle of winter. It's absolutely stupid, but it is what it is. All right, let us continue. Again, he would say to his hearers, "You cannot conquer the Romans, better convert them, and they are your enemies no longer. They already have your temple in their possession. Their yoke is getting heavier every day. And the more you fight against them, the more they will abuse you. Therefore, your only chance is to love them and try to make your yoke easy and your burden light by having them your friends. Indeed, the conduct of Jesus was so strange and incompatible with the interests of the Jews as a nation that it seemed to me that he was a subject employed by the Romans to keep the Jews submissive and obedient to all their tyranny and abuse." This policy was most powerfully attacked by the officiating priests, by the Shamites and the Zealots, and in fact the whole Jewish nation was becoming aroused to a war heat. The reprimands of Jesus were so severe against the rich and highly educated that they had turned against him and brought all the power they had, both of their wealth and talent, so that I saw that a bloody insurrection was brewing fast. The public mind of the Jews was becoming more and more divided and corrupt. Heretical doctrines were being diffused all over the land. The temple was forsaken, and the holy sacraments neglected. The people were dividing into sects, and these breaches were like a rent in a garment, tearing wider apart continually. As it seemed to me, the whole of the Jewish theocracy was about to be blown away, as a bubble on a breaker. As the Jews became more and more divided and confused, the tyranny of the Romans increased. All they wanted was an excuse to slaughter the Jews and confiscate their property. At this time, both the doctrine and religion of the Jews were spreading rapidly all over Rome, which gave the Romans great alarm. Seyane undertook to have an ordinance passed in the Senate, abolishing the Jewish religion from Rome. And when he found it would cause an insurrection, they banished all the Jews from Rome. And back they came to Judea with all their idolatry and heresy, and many other corrupt principles from the Romans, which fitted them to join any party for profit. Up to this time, the Roman governors had shown great kindness to the Jews. There never was a better man than Hyrcanus. The Jews enjoyed great peace during his administration, but Tiberius has turned against us. Pilate has removed the army from Caesarea to Jerusalem. I say no nation with any self-respect, or one that had any energy left, would or could stand it without a struggle. Now the preaching of John the Baptist and Jesus of Nazareth had brought all these things upon us. When Herod Antipas captured John, it quieted matters in Galilee so that they had no peace until Jesus started it up afresh. I had issued orders to Jesus to desist from preaching unless he taught as the Jews taught. He sent me the impertinent word that his doctrine was not of this world, but had reference to the world to come, when he was all the time doing all he could to destroy the peace and harmony of this world. Now, according to our law, in the Safra by Jose B. Talmud, it devolves on me to see that the people have sound doctrine taught them. Hence it is my duty to examine all the midrashim, or sermons of all the preaching priests, and if anyone teach the people wrongly, or if his conduct is not in correspondence with his profession, to cause him to desist, or if any disregard the holy laws of ablution, and in any way defile himself, or if he shall be guilty of misconduct in any way, either in manner of life or doctrine, to adjudge such as one, and pronounce sentence for his crime upon him. This I did upon Jesus of Nazareth, to save the church from heresy, and to save the cause of the Jewish commonwealth from final ruin. But understand that I did not act rashly nor illegally, as I am accused. I only passed sentence under the protest and order of the whole court belonging to the high priest, containing 12 members, or elders and priests. And thus you will see it was not my voluntary act, but was a legal one, and in accordance with law. After I examined Jesus on the various charges, he said in the presence of all the court that each and all of them were true. I then reasoned with him and asked him, if the court of the high priest would forgive him of these charges, would he desist from these things in all time to come? He answered most emphatically and positively, he would not. Under these circumstances, I was compelled, according to our law, to sentence him to die. For if he continued to promulgate his pernicious heresies, the Jews as a nation must perish with their religion. And as you find in the Tosefta, that the nation has always the right of self-preservation, and as we had conceded the right to the Romans of executing our criminal laws, it became my painful duty to send him to Pontius Pilate with the following charges. Caiaphas, high priest of the Most High God, to Pontius Pilate, governor of the Roman province. Jesus of Nazareth is thus charged by the high court of the Jews, first, with teaching the doctrine that there are more gods than one, which is contrary to the teaching of the Jewish law, which he most positively refuses to desist from in the presence of this court. Second, he teaches that he is a God, which is contrary to the Jewish law, and he is visible and comprehensible, and after being asked to desist by this court, he most positively affirms that he is the Son of God. Third, he teaches and affirms that the Bath Goloi, Holy Spirit, cannot come until he goes away, which is contrary to the teachings of the Jews, because it was he that brooded over the waters and has been in the habitual light of the world ever since, from all of which he refuses to desist. He teaches baptism as the seal of God, instead of circumcision, which was established by the decrees of God with Abraham as a seal of the Jews, and when abjured to desist by this court, declared he would not. He teaches asceticism as the means of salvation, contrary to the Jewish custom, and affirmed in the presence of this court he would not desist. He teaches that the Levitical ablution is of no service, while we hold that the outward washing is the sign of inward purity, and he abjured to desist. He emphatically refused. He has abrogated the ordinance given by God to Moshe of the Paschal Supper, wherein we should roast a lamb and eat it with unleavened bread. But Jesus has introduced a custom altogether different without any authority. He has introduced common bread and wine, which are not only forbidden, but are well qualified to excite men's passions and make them forget God rather than to remember and trust him. This feast having been introduced, that we should remember to trust him in the hours of trouble. When asked why he did this, all he would say was, "Hitherto I work, and my Father works." He has abrogated the priesthood and set the temple at naught, which is the very life's blood of the Jewish faith. Were it not that God our Father has given us these holy ordinances, we would not be so tenacious of them. We know they are the pillars upon which the Jewish theocracy is built, and that we cannot live without them. Although Jesus of Nazareth has been abjured time and again to stop teaching these ways of death, he has as often declared he would not. Therefore, it devolves on me as the proper and the holy office to pronounce sentence upon him. These charges were written by my scribe and sent with the officers to Pilate for his consent. Of course, I did not expect him to execute him as he did, but it seems that the mob was so great that Pilate never received them. I expected Pilate to send Jesus back to me so that I could send him to you for your approval, and if so, then I would proceed to try him with Urim and Thummim, with the regular black tees on guard, as our law requires. But it seems that Pilate thirsted for his blood, like all guilty tyrants. He was afraid of his own shadow and wished to destroy everything that threatened his power. With these reasons for my actions, I submit the case which I am sure will be considered favorably by my masters of Israel. All right. I don't know that I don't want to start another portion. The next is chapter 7, the report of Caiaphas to the Sanhedrin concerning the resurrection of Jesus. You know what? I'll read some of this, and yeah, I'll just go ahead and read some of it since we have some time. After having made the preceding record of Caiaphas on unwinding the same scroll, we found another report from him. It may be interesting to the reader to know what we mean by a scroll. It is similar to parchment. The Hebrew word pneumet means a pulp made from the bark of the reed into a paste and dried in the sun until it is hard. When pressed and polished, it shines beautifully, and its surface is as smooth as our paper. It is of two kinds. One is called papyrus, the other hierotype. The latter is more costly and is used by priests alone. It is about 16 inches wide and is cemented together by a gum that exudes from a tree resembling our elm. It is written upon with some kind of indelible ink or paint, with the common reed quill, which is fashioned like our pens. The writing is done by the sofer, which is the Hebrew word for a scribe. He is called grammatius by the Greeks. The report of Caiaphas is written in what is known as the square Hebrew. The letters are from a half inch to an inch in size, so that one can imagine what a roll of parchment it would take to record a deed. It is read only with difficulty by the best Hebrew scholars, and they must have textbooks to assist them. But after one has gotten the thread of the subject, he can get along with it. This is the reason I got Dr. McIntosh to go with me. He and Dr. Twyman have been in the business for many years. The windlass, as it might be called, for it more resembles our common rope winders than anything I can think of. This is William Mahan talking. Is a square piece of timber about 3 inches in diameter, to which the scroll is fastened at one end, around which it is rolled like a spool. At the proper distance are tied 2 transverse sticks to hold the parchment to its proper place. The windlass with the scroll is placed at one end of a table, and an empty windlass at the other end, so that as you unwind from the one to read, the scroll winds around the other. The letters are very distinct. There are hundreds of these arranged in rows. They are all lettered and numbered with their dates on them. This makes it easy to find anything desired. There is another class of books, a fine sheep, or goat skin, about 8 by 12 inches. The writing on these is very fine and difficult to read. They are bound between cedar boards with clasps and contain from 8 to 40 sheets to the book. These are the kind of books on which Josephus wrote 72. But to return to Caiaphas' report, after unwinding several feet, as before stated, we came across another communication from Caiaphas. I hardly know whether to call it a resignation or a confession. One thing I do know is it is one of the most solemn things that I have ever read. We thank God that we had come to Constantinople, and that Muhammad had given orders to preserve these sacred scrolls in the mosque of Saint Sophia. It is as follows. The Sanhedrin by Sifri II. To you, masters of Israel, as I have made a former defense to you, and you have approved the same, I feel in duty bound to communicate to you some facts that have come to my knowledge since that communication. A few days after the execution of Jesus of Nazareth, the report of his resurrection from the dead became so common that I found it necessary to investigate it, because the excitement was more intense than before, and mine own life as well as that of Pilate was in danger. I sent for Malchus, the captain of the royal city guard, who informed me he knew nothing personally, as he had placed Isham in command of the guard. But from what he could learn from the soldiers, the scene was awe-inspiring, and the report was so generally believed that it was useless to deny it. He thought my only chance was to suppress it among the soldiers, and have John and Peter banished to Crete, or arrested and imprisoned, and if they would not be quiet, to treat them as I had treated Jesus. He said that all the soldiers he had conversed with were convinced that Jesus was resurrected by supernatural power and was still living, and that he was no human being. For the light and the angels and the dead that came out of their graves all went to prove that something had happened that never occurred on earth before. He said that John and Peter were spreading it all over the country, and that if Jesus would appear at the head of a host and declare, "For the King of the Jews," he believed all the Jews would fight for him. I sent for the lieutenant, who gave a lengthy account of the occurrence that morning, all of which I suppose you have learned and will investigate. From this I am convinced that something transcending the laws of nature took place that morning that cannot be accounted for upon natural laws, and I find it is useless to try to get any of the soldiers to deny it, for they are so excited that they cannot be reasoned with. I regret that I had the soldiers placed at the tomb, for the very things that they were to prevent, they have helped to establish. After questioning the soldiers and officers to my satisfaction, my mind being so disturbed that I could neither eat nor sleep, I sent for John and Peter. They came and brought Mary and Joanna, who are the women that went to embalm Jesus' body the morning of the resurrection, as it is called. They were very interesting as they related the circumstances. Mary says that when they went, day was just breaking. They met the soldiers returning from the sepulchre, and saw nothing strange until they came to the tomb and found that it was empty. The stone that covered the sepulchre was rolled to one side, and two men dressed in flowing white were sitting, one at each end of the sepulchre. Mary asked them, where was her Lord? They said, "He is risen from the dead. Did he not tell you that he would rise the third day and show himself to the people to prove that he was the Lord of life? Go tell his disciples," said they. Oh my gosh, that went quick. All right, we'll definitely pick it up next time. God bless all. Good night.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.